not fall in New York City. No one's gonna catch you.
My back! Oh, my back!
Howdy friends, before we jump into the video, just wanted to take a quick moment to chat about the latest release in the world of Magic the Gathering. Now for those of you who have followed my channel for a while, you know that I love Magic the Gathering, and it's been a game that me and Mrs. Dudi have played multiple times, and even sitting in a Scottish pub we've played a couple rounds. So imagine my surprise and delight when Magic released their latest set in Aether Drift. Now releasing on the 14th of February, Aether Drift's cards are all based and set around the theme of, well, racing, with vibes of a bit of, say, Akira, maybe a little bit of Warhammer 40k with like that orc racing, as well as some cool death and destruction style cards like, say, Gas Guzzler or The Last Ride. Now, when it comes to playing Magic though, vehicles are a somewhat new mechanic to me, because most of my decks are pre-cons and pretty standard, and the Aether Drift set has been great for not only teaching me about vehicles, but also drawing me in with its unique styling and cards. So if you're into Magic the Gathering and racing, I'd say give Aether Drift a look. Not only has it got some great bundles available, but it's also got two Commander decks too if you want a simple pick up and play format with the Commander playstyle. But Aether Drift officially releases on the 14th of Feb, so by the time this video drops. And with that, let's get into the video. Looking at recent comic book video games, they're either really good, entertaining, and time-sink titles like the Arkham Series or PlayStation Spider-Man series, or the wicked Guardians of the Galaxy game, or they're really, really bad. But in the early 2000s, we had heaps of comic book video games to choose from, and while most of them were tie-in movie games, there were some gems in the bunch.
I know. I feel it too.
We had the absolute classics like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2, X-Men Legends 1 and 2, which, yeah, they're kind of the same as the Ultimate Alliance games, but we also had the Wolverine Origins game, a game that was better than the movie, and the Ultimate Spider-Man game, and hell, a lot of Spider-Man games actually really worked.
Even me?
No.
But there was one classic game that this year turns 20 years old that I played the shit out of as a kid, and it was kind of a movie tie-in game. Kinda. Well, its hero was voiced by the actor who portrayed him in the films, and the game also uses the movie logo. But unlike Spider-Man movie games or Batman movie games, it was brutal and released on consoles and PC 1 year after the release of the movie, and that's 2005's release of The Punisher.
Surprise, motherfucker!
In 2004, during sort of that early hype comic book period where we got movies like, say, X-Men and Spider-Man and Daredevil, in 2004 we got The Punisher, an action movie that I thought kinda slapped. Now, as a kid, the first time I watched this, it kinda blew me away. Not only because it was a comic book character, but it was also an action movie that kinda felt like it was worthy of Schwarzenegger or Stallone, that you could easily remove the Marvel properties of the story and just insert those actors. But it was also my first real exposure to the character of the Punisher, with my only other reference point of who the character was being the old Spider-Man games on PlayStation 1, so seeing a Marvel character boil someone's face, get blown up, and to my delight, especially as a 13-year-old boy, a game that released even more brutally than the 2004 film, I was pretty excited.
Oh my sweet Jesus.
Hell, this movie and this game is one of the reasons I started buying and reading comic books, as the first ever comic book I ever bought was Batman vs. The Punisher, and I've still got my copy of that, and it's a brilliant read if you get the chance.
Go outside, nerd. Get out. Go.
The game, however, was developed by Volition, the same developers of the Saints Row series, and a series that started pretty good, I will say, and ended up, well... But releasing 1 year before Saints Row, The Punisher was a third-person action shooter where you play as, well, The Punisher, voiced by Thomas Jane, who just finished playing him in the 2004 movie.
How many people have you killed in the last few weeks?
Not sure. There were a lot of explosions.
The story starts off with two detectives interviewing a captured Frank Castle, and the story, campaign and missions act as flashbacks as to how the Punisher caused chaos through New York and wraps up near his capture and imprisonment. But the first mission kicks off with the Punisher clearing out a crack house, which gives him some breadcrumbs to follow. And from that, it will end up with him clearing out mafia crime bosses, dealing with the Yakuza, and even crossing paths with famous Marvel characters, but I'll get to that in a minute.
When do we get the freaking guns?
Gameplay wise, well, it is a third-person shooter similar to that of the early Max Payne games, and if you didn't play Max Payne, something that might be maybe a little similar for your reference is maybe Gears of War in a way.
What the fuck did I just hear?
But this game has no cover mechanics. It is a third-person shooter where you will dive around corners, use enemies as human shields, and you can kinda awkwardly stand around corners to take cover if you need to, or, well, you can crouch behind furniture, but it is a 2005 Punisher video game, and thankfully, there are a fair amount of weapons to choose from.
That's good.
And speaking of the weapons, the game slowly introduces you and allows you to unlock and use weapons with a simple system or mechanic, in that if you find a weapon and pick it up, you can basically keep it and take it back to the Punisher's apartment, which will work as your main menu, but there's also a weapon locker that will allow you to change your weapon loadout before you actually start a mission.
Whoa, careful there, Annie Oakley.
But as the first mission is at a crack house, this basically acts as a sort of standard tutorial for the game and how to use weapons, how to grab enemies as human shields, and most importantly, but also the most entertaining mechanic, how to interrogate goons. Now, enemies with white Punisher skulls over their heads have information that the Punisher can obtain in a way.
This is your last warning about that.
And when you get close to that enemy, you have the option to grab them, basically using them as a human shield, but you can interrogate the goons in 4 simple ways to start with. Firstly, it's simply just choking them out. Secondly, you can hold a gun to their face and threaten to pull the trigger. Thirdly, you punch them repeatedly. And the fourth way is one of my favourites when it comes to the simple ways of interrogating enemies, is slamming their face into the ground over and over again. The interrogation system is a little bit like the reload mechanic in Gears of War, but instead of hitting a button in a relevant slider, you need to damage enemies so they lose health, and you need to keep their heartbeats within a certain range for 2 seconds. Now, successfully doing this will have the goon or the enemy spill their guts, telling you whatever information they're withholding, or whatever information they have that might offer you some kind of assistance, like having the goons in the next room not unload on you, or in one level, have the Mafia work with you while you face off against the Yakuza, or they might tell you that there are some hidden weapons and ammo hidden around the map.
Nothing! Grenades! In locker! Storage room!
However, the most entertaining thing about the interrogations are the special ones scattered through each level. Now, instead of punching someone in the face or threatening to shoot them in the head, you'll use level and environmental elements around as a negotiation tool. Now, at the crack house, you have a simple one like hanging someone off the side of a building or smashing their head into a window frame. But as you get away from the crack house and you say move to a zoo, you can hold someone in front of a charging rhino or hold their head over a electrical eel tank, and when you visit a pier that's in New York, you'll hold someone over a shark, and it's pretty damn creative. And half the fun is this creative interrogation method, which thankfully can be easily found with these white marks located on the ground, which works as 2 things. One being that it is a fun way to interrogate people, and the other is seeing this special interrogation marker on the ground is a bit of a flag that someone nearby has some useful information. Frank can also execute enemies when he gets close to them, and they're all pretty relatively brutal, yet kind of funny at the same time. Frank will basically uppercut someone so hard it kills them, he'll do the standard slicing of the throat, he'll pick up a goon and fire a pistol right under their chin, and one of the fun ones is throwing your primary weapon at them, causing them to catch it, and you just use your firearm or your sidearm to just shoot them in the head, or you stab them in the top of the head.
Yes!
But what makes the executions works is your general goons, your enemies, your villains, they'll mouth off constantly, saying that Frank is a bad shot and that they're tougher than the Punisher, and that they're all that in a bag of potato chips.
No, I heard that somewhere.
But when you perform an execution on an enemy while they're in the middle of this little shit-talking session, they're kind of stunned and caught in the middle of a sentence, and it's kind of funny. And speaking of funny, seeing these goons and enemies talk shit and you pop around a corner and shoot them in the knee and they comically scream, it always kind of got a laugh out of me. Anyway, so going back to more sort of gameplay, but each mission too generally has as well a unique execution option. Now, where interrogating gives you creative ways to extract information, you can use this interrogation method to execute enemies. And there's this unique execution option in the game too, which acts as a cool way of killing goons without interrogating them. Sort of like kicking them out of a window, or throwing them into an electrical junction box, or throwing them into the blades of a helicopter. It's all kind of fun. But outside of the executions and the creative interrogations, what is the gameplay like? Well, it is a third-person shooter where weapons have that sort of early 2000s classic gory combat. And when you got shotguns at close range and giant revolvers like hand cannons, limbs will pop off and it's pretty damn rad, and it gives you a bit of a sense of power with each of its weapons as well. And when you burn enemies with a Molotov cocktail or use the very dangerous flamethrower, thugs and goons, they'll get that torch skin look to them and they run around manically. But, well, weapon-wise, you start off with a standard pump-action shotgun, traditional pistols, before unlocking Uzis, MP5s, and as well as you progress in the game, you unlock more weapons. But, well, weapons act as well like they should, because shotguns are devastating at close range, assault rifles sort of have that medium to long range, and sniper rifles are very precise. What I mean by that is each weapon sort of doesn't feel useless. Like, for example, when you're running around a mission and you run out of ammo for your assault rifle but you see a shotgun sitting there, I never really had that feeling of, oh fuck, now I have to move to a shotgun. Well, now it's like, okay, now I get to play in close range combat. Like, every weapon here just sort of feels fun to use. The only weapon I didn't really vibe with was the flamethrower, because it was more dangerous than it was useful.
That's the beauty of it.
But when looking at the combat and not playing it for yourself, if you're just like watching someone play it, it does look a bit bare bones, and it kinda is. You go into a room, you clear the enemies, you move into the next room and repeat, but the gunplay is pretty damn solid. The early 2000s gore gives weapons a sense of weight and power, but the environments that you fight this mafia or the Yakuza or Russian goons make it sort of half the fun itself. Now, the Punisher also has a special ability called Slaughter Mode, where he'll basically go into a rage mode, and instead of using traditional weapons, he will use combat knives to either throw at targets, which stuns them, or he can plug goons full of knives, taking them out, and he can also quickly execute who's ever standing immediately in front of them. And this ability does come in handy when you are surrounded by enemies, as goons plugged full of knives will stun them, keeping them occupied for a bit while you focus on taking other ones out. During this mode too, the screen does go into a black and white mode, but Frank and targets remain in colour, so it does come in handy when you're trying to take out thugs who are trying to hide around the map or the environment. But while the mode is cool when it's in use, I didn't overly prefer to use it, and I'd only use it in say one instance towards the end of the game when I was actually surrounded by enemies and I felt like I had to use it. But what Punisher combat, executions, interrogations, and general gameplay gets right is it is just a simple chaotic shooter, and it works perfectly for a character like the Punisher. There is no in-depth gadgets, no free roam, no story that will draw you in and keep you there. It's the Punisher taking on crime, criminals, and kingpins, literally in a brutal fashion, and it's enough, and it's kinda perfect. And speaking of kingpins, this game does have other Marvel characters from the comics make an appearance, and during one mission in a downtown pier, you'll find yourself taking on Russians to run into Black Widow, and here she has an actual Russian accent because Natasha Romanoff is Russian. But we've also got Matt Murdock, Nick Fury, Bullseye, the Russian sort of big goon, Kingpin, and even Iron Man. And I think because of this game, anytime I think of Iron Man, it's this suit design. But these characters too don't make pointless appearances in the story. They aren't Easter eggs for the sake of it. Black Widow is tied up with sort of Russian mafia, which then becomes an enemy faction in the game. Nick Fury is linked with Black Widow, so when you head to an island to stop a stolen nuke, Nick Fury's along for the ride. You'll find the Punisher villain Jigsaw has plans on stealing high-tech Iron Man suits from Stark Building in New York, so naturally when all chaos breaks loose in the Stark Tower, Iron Man arrives, and it wouldn't be a Punisher game with organised crime without Kingpin. The mission structure also works pretty well for the story too. Now it starts off at a crack house in Frank's neighborhood before moving to a vehicle chop shop and then adding in pretty cool event style missions where Frank will go to a bar that is a Nucci hangout and take on a boss. And it's a pretty simple, small mission, however it is so quick and it's so fun, it kinda works. And then there are other missions like this one too, where we take on the Russian in Frank's apartment, which is basically pulled straight out of the 2004 film. However, not absolutely everything in this game works, at least for me. Firstly, the game is a bit repetitive. Each mission is generally the same. However, the missions aren't long and the creative interrogations and executions keep things fresh, but on paper it is pretty simple. Now, the controls, they are a bit dated, obviously, being a 20-year-old game. However, the most random choice Felician did was with the interrogation system on PC. So if you have a thug or informant spill their guts, you need to keep their heart rate within a certain range for 2 seconds. Now, I remember playing this on console as a kid, and from memory, you would use the controller's thumbsticks to keep the heart rate within the bar. On PC though, what would you think the way to move this bar around? Now, keep in mind, you're interrogating someone as the Punisher, and when you're doing so, you're generally locked in place, so you're not moving around the map. Now, if you thought using the movement keys on your keyboards, well then yes, you would be a sensible human being.
My goodness, what an idea. Why didn't I think of that?
If you thought moving your mouse left and right, well, that's still acceptable. But no, instead you move your mouse up and down, and in some instances too, in rapid movements. And the control mechanic for this on PC just doesn't work, actually causing some accidental and premature kills when interrogating someone.
He's dead? Decapitated by an ill-tempered mutated sea bass?
And with that, there's no real way to measure the pace and movement of trying to keep someone's heart rate in a certain sort of gauge. And you can easily just push yourself a little too far, causing you to flat kill your target before they've even told you what you want to hear.
I will tell you nothing!
You've been forked.
People never think how things affect the family of a henchman.
Some missions too also repeat themselves, where in one mission you'll go to the docks twice, or in one instance in the story you will attend the same level twice when taking on the Russians, at first with Black Widow and then going back to take on high-tech Yakuza with the SHIELD agents. And for those of you who do not want any spoilers for its story elements, please skip to the timestamp on screen. I think though the biggest letdown for the Punisher is in its boss fights. Now the first one is against a mob boss in a back area of a bar, and it's pretty bullet spongy. Then they try to also get around this by saying that he's wearing body armor.
Bobby's wearing Kevlar under his suit. So it's gotta be a headshot.
So headshots will be needed. But, well, the boss fight should be sort of over in one solid shot, yeah? Well, no, because it's just really spongy and it kinda doesn't work. And the weird thing is, you will face off against like enemies covered in sort of heavy armor and stuff like that as well in this game. And a headshot is a headshot at any enemy. If they're wearing a sort of a helmet or armor, you can shoot the helmet off, shoot them in the head again, they're dead, done, no worries. But for bosses, it just doesn't work that way.
That doesn't make sense.
However, the boss fight against the tank, that was probably the funniest one, as the boss fight was over quicker than it started. You can literally pick up and fire a grenade launcher that's over against the wall, and then fire it over the shipping containers, and that's it, the boss fight's done.
Are you serious?
But then we also get two fights against the Russian. Now the first one is inside the apartment, which is pretty simple and quick. We climb onto his back when he's dazed, we run him into interactive weapons in the apartment, game over, done. But the Russian gets away and we end up facing off against him again when we're trying to stop a nuke from being fired. And this interpretation of the Russian boss fight isn't that great, because apparently his skin is too tough to be shot at, even with powerful rifles, so you need to shoot barrels that he's trying to throw at you, which deal explosive damage, and that's the only way he can be killed. Then from there, he will catch fire and he will chase you around the map, and I just threw grenades at him that would deal damage, but what you're supposed to do is lead him towards barrels scattered around the map, get him close to those barrels so they catch fire, and then you shoot the barrels which damage him, and it's a pretty crap boss fight if you ask me.
Something's missing.
Something's missing, all right.
However, I think the worst boss fight is the final fight in the game against Jigsaw, a crime boss and Punisher villain that is, let's say, pretty iconic for the character of the Punisher. So you face off against Jigsaw though in this game, who is in a Iron Man outfit and is impervious to damage, and to take him out you need to shoot his jetpack when he's facing the wrong way, which will cause him to crash down to the ground and then run around trying to shoot you. And the only way you can damage him after he's sort of lost his jetpack is from explosive remote mines that his goons drop, or you can find spawning around corners of the map. And the weird thing is, these explosive remote mines are introduced only in this boss fight. They're not given to you early in the game, so it is a fair bit of trial and error trying to figure out how to do this, and it did take me a bit of time.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And, well, this boss fight as well just doesn't work for this character, sort of like having a kaiju fight against Batman and Suicide Squad. It feels like this boss fight should take place inside a public place, let's say a nightclub, and Jigsaw keeps taking hostages, and the Punisher, maybe let's say he takes more damage as the fight takes place, causing his aim to sway, making it harder not to hit the hostage. Like, fighting a mob boss shouldn't be like fighting Iron Man. What also, well, I wouldn't say what didn't work for me, but what felt kinda weird, but the last mission is the Punisher in prison on Rikers Island, and he's deliberately gotten himself arrested because Jigsaw is also in prison, and it's basically an excuse to take him out. But Frank Castle breaking out of prison kinda seems like a opening mission to its story rather than a closing mission for the campaign.
Yep.
Like, the Punisher getting caught by the police and breaking out of prison I think would make a pretty damn cool opening mission, with basic weapons and teaching the player not to take out civilians or non-criminals. And that's something this game does pretty damn well, is because if you kill an innocent or, a non-criminal, it's game over, and I like that they did that. But outside of the gameplay, the sound design and voiceovers work really damn well. Now, Thomas Jane returns as the Punisher, and it's more Thomas Jane Punisher, so there's nothing to complain about there. Black Widow is Russian, because she is, and Kingpin sounds imposing, and it all works.
Pretty good.
However, the music and score for this game, in one word, mag-fucking-nificent. Now, as a kid, I grew up playing this. My mates at school were playing Resident Evil 4, my brother was playing God of War, and I was playing The Punisher. Now, I've not played this game since probably 2009, and booting this game up for this video, the music hit me right in the nostalgia straight into my veins. And there's little hints of classic Italian mobster music when facing off against the Nucci's, and it works so damn well.
Your face, and I'll end all your troubles. Come on out!
Honestly, this score could come out on vinyl, and I would buy it in a fucking heartbeat. Now, since replaying this though, I've rewatched the 2004 film, and I've showed that to Mrs. Dudi too because she hasn't seen it. I've rewatched Daredevil Season 2 and the Punisher series, and I've recently bought myself a unhealthy amount of comic books and a new Magneto statue that I tried to sneak past my wife. And I'm very keen to read the Punisher Max series because I've never read that before.
It's good. Very, very good. Van Johnson good.
But replaying this game, and honestly it holds up pretty damn well for a 20-year-old game, but it also had me thinking. We're starting to get more Marvel games now with Spider-Man, Marvel Rivals, EA are working on an Iron Man game, and then there's a Black Panther game, and the Captain America Black Panther game, and then there's also the fucking Blade game. But I would love to see a first-person Punisher game developed by Machine Games, who, yeah, they're most likely working on another Indiana Jones game, and I won't complain about that. But imagine the Wolfenstein games, but you're playing as the Punisher. I think it'd be pretty rad.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's not a bad idea.
But this 2005 entry too, I think needs a modern remaster, re-release, or just an easy way to access and play this game, as The Punisher isn't readily available on consoles, and while you can get a PC disc copy if your PC still has a disc drive, you cannot get this game on Steam or GOG. But I got this up and running from two rad creators. First off being my mate G-Man Lives for helping a brother out, and Retro Renew has a video on his channel on how to get this working with mods, and the black and white filters for the interrogations to be turned off. And if you are interested in that, the link is in the description below if you want to get it up and running on your PC. But for a 20-year-old game, The Punisher is just a great, simple pick-up-and-play gory shooter. It doesn't need a over-the-top, in-depth story, it doesn't need an open world with free roam, and the foundations that Volition did with The Punisher would make a great jumping-off point for another Punisher game. And I think it was best said by my mate G-Man Lives. The Punisher is the inspiration for Max Payne, but the Max Payne games is the inspiration for the Punisher game. Hell, this game does end as well on a cliffhanger and we never get an answer to it. And sadly, Volition have closed their doors after the poor reception of the Saints Row reboot, but I'd still love to see someone like Machine Games or maybe even id Software make a Punisher game. But whether your first introduction to the Punisher was this wicked game, which is now over 20 years old, or maybe it was the Thomas Jane movie, or maybe even Dolph Lundgren, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.